Right now, somewhere in Vietnam, a man is delivering 300 meals a day on a motorcycle that cost him $1,500. Right now in Ohio, a man is signing a 60-month loan on a motorcycle that cost him $22,000. They are buying the same category of vehicle. They are not buying the same thing. That is what this video is about. In 2024, the Asia-Pacific region accounted for approximately 80% of the global motorcycle market by volume. The United States, with the world's largest economy and over 330 million people, accounted for a fraction of that. Think about that for a second. America, the country that invented mass production, that put the world on four wheels, is one of the smallest motorcycle markets on Earth per capita. In India, the Royal Enfield 350, a real motorcycle, not a scooter, starts at the equivalent of $1,600 US. The same brand sells its most expensive model in the US for under $6,000. A standard Harley-Davidson in America averages $25,000. That is not a price difference. That is a philosophical difference about what a motorcycle is for. The Honda Super Cub crossed 100 million units sold in 2017, more than the Beetle, more than the Corolla, the most produced motor vehicle in human history. It is made in 16 factories across 15 countries and sold in over 160 markets. Honda just stopped selling it in the United States after 2024. They didn't announce it. The Super Cub page just disappeared from Honda's US website. In 1957, Takeo Fujisawa, Honda's co-founder, watched deliverymen on mopeds in Europe and had one thought. He didn't think about racing. He didn't think about horsepower. He thought about soba noodle shops. His exact instruction to Soichiro Honda was this: build a motorcycle small enough that a shop owner could carry a tray of noodles with one hand while riding it. That was the design brief for the best-selling vehicle in human history. When the Super Cub reached Vietnam in the 1960s, the word Honda became a generic term for any motorcycle, not a brand, a noun, a category, like Kleenex or Xerox. In Vietnam today, a motorcycle taxi driver is still called a xe ôm, and the bike he rides is still, very often, a Super Cub or its direct descendant. Because in Southeast Asia, a motorcycle isn't a hobby, it is how you live. The Super Cub didn't just transport people, it built entire economies. In the 1960s, a Japanese farmer could ride his Super Cub to sell his rice at a market 20 kilometers away. A Vietnamese woman could carry her children, her goods, and her business on one bike. In Indonesia today, a Gojek rider does the same thing with a 150cc fuel-injected equivalent. The motorcycle was not a luxury purchase, it was a business investment. It paid for itself in weeks. Today, Honda makes the PCX 160 in Thailand for the equivalent of $2,500. It gets 80 miles per gallon. It carries a family of 4 in Vietnam. It is also the motorcycle Honda decided not to bother importing to the United States. Not because Americans couldn't use it, because Americans wouldn't want it. And that is the entire story. In 1959, when Honda opened its first American office in Los Angeles, the motorcycle market here looked nothing like Asia's. Annual U.S. motorcycle sales were around 60,000 units. In Europe, that number was 2 million. And the bikes Americans were buying were not utility machines. They were Harley-Davidsons, Triumphs, motorcycles built for men who wanted to project something: danger, freedom, rebellion. The American motorcycle was a costume before it was a vehicle. Honda's "You Meet the Nicest People on a Honda" campaign, launched in 1963, was one of the most successful rebranding efforts in marketing history. It briefly made motorcycles mainstream in America. By the mid-1960s, the Super Cub was selling to housewives, students, and delivery companies. The image cracked. And then the boomers got older, and the Harley got bigger, and the price went up, and the costume became the default again. This is the critical point. The motorcycle industry did not accidentally price Americans out of affordable bikes. It deliberately built for the market it had. A 50-year-old professional with $62,500 household income and a paid-off mortgage doesn't need a motorcycle. He wants one. And that want, the freedom, the identity, the rumble, is worth $20,000 to him. Honda understood this. So did Harley. The entire U.S. industry structure was built around a hobby, not a tool. The problem is that the boomer who bought the $25,000 Road King is getting older. U.S. motorcycle sales fell 7.6% in 2025. That was the weakest first half of a year in a decade. Riders under 18 have fallen from 8% of the owners in 1985 to just 2% now. Riders aged 18 to 24 dropped from 16% of the market to 6%. The generation that should be replacing them isn't buying $25,000 motorcycles, and nobody built them a $3,000 one. And then there is CF Moto, a Chinese brand that most Americans had barely heard of 3 years ago. CF Moto sold the 300 NK naked bike in the US for $3,499, brand new, from a dealer, with a warranty. The traditional industry dismissed it. The forensic data said something different. CF Moto posted a 154% growth rate in the US market. 154%. That is not a trend. That is an earthquake. Harley-Davidson sells the X440 in India, built in partnership with Hero MotoCorp for the equivalent of $3,000. It is, by any measure, a Harley. Same name, same badge, different world. They will not sell it here. The tariffs make it complicated. The brand identity makes it impossible. Because a $3,000 Harley in America would do to a $25,000 Harley what a $3,000 iPhone would do to a $1,000 one. The product would survive, the margin would not. Honda pulled the Super Cub from the US market in 2024. Think about what that means. The best-selling motor vehicle in human history, a bike that works everywhere on Earth. Honda looked at the US market, ran the numbers, and concluded that Americans would not buy it in enough volume to justify keeping it here. That is not a judgment on the bike, it's a judgment on us. The American motorcycle market is not dying, it is splitting. The top of the market, the $25,000 cruisers, the $15,000 touring rigs, is contracting as the boomer base ages out. The bottom of the market, the sub-$6,000 sport bikes, the Chinese and Indian brands, the machines that are closer to tools than costumes, is growing. The question is whether the industry is structured to serve both. Right now, it is not. Americans don't pay $20,000 for a motorcycle because they are irrational. They pay it because they were never offered another story. The industry, for 70 years, sold them freedom, not transport, not utility, not practicality, freedom. And freedom in the American imagination has always cost more than it needs to. The question the industry is now scrambling to answer is this: what happens when a generation grows up that wants the freedom but cannot afford the price tag? The answer, it turns out, looks a lot like a Honda Super Cub. If this changed how you think about what a motorcycle is actually for, subscribe to the channel. We dig into the economics, the history, and the decisions that the motorcycle industry would rather you didn't notice every single week.